Hi everyone. My name is Vikram, and thank you for attending this webinar. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you are. Uh, my name is Vikram, and I work for GL Communications, and we will be presenting a webinar today called Load Testing Call Contact Centers. Um, I'm joined today by our Director of Engineering, Robert Bishevsky, and also on the line I have Sanjeev, and Sanjeev will be monitoring your questions. So please feel free at any time to type questions into the chat box. And what we can do is throughout the webinar, if there are a lot of questions, we can stop and answer some of the questions as we go, but there will also be time at the end for a Q&A session. So feel free to ask questions anytime, and Sanjeev can relay the questions to Rob and myself, or Sanjeev can also unmute you, and you can ask the question directly to us at the end. So thank you everyone for attending. I hope everybody is safe, and just a couple other announcements. This webinar is being recorded, so in case you have to leave early or in case you want to share it with a friend, we will post the webinar to our website in probably a day or two. Um, so you can absolutely check back later and watch the webinar, and we'll send an email notification when the webinar is posted. Okay, so this is an ongoing series of webinars. GL Communications does webinars once every month or once every 2 months on average. And today we are talking about load testing call contact centers. I think you're going to find this very, very interesting and very, very critical, especially at this moment in time with the whole COVID-19 crisis. So I hope you'll find this very informative. And again, please ask questions at any time. So let's go ahead and get started. I hope that everybody can see my screen and see my mouse and can hear me clearly. Um, so just a quick overview on GL Communications. We're located in the United States. That's our headquarters in Gaithersburg, Maryland. We've been around for over 30 years. Basically, we do all sorts of telecommunications testing services. We have a consulting branch that does telecommunications consulting services and more generally engineering services consulting. And we also have a product line. And for many of you who are familiar with our product line, we produce test and measurement equipment to test all telecom networks. Um, we have expertise in basically all telecom networks, whether it's the public switch telephone network, Ethernet IP networks, wireless, SONET, analog networks. It doesn't really matter. We have a lot of different test solutions and a lot of in-house expertise on these networks. And our products help you analyze these networks, monitor these networks, visualize these networks, capture data, store data, and so on. So we've been around for 30 years supplying internet service providers, cellular service providers, equipment manufacturers, defense contractors, and so on with their telecommunications testing needs. Okay, today we want to talk specifically about call centers. So the agenda here is we're first going to talk about call centers and what type of problems they can be facing. And then we'll dive into our test solutions to address those problems. Um, we provide both testing services and hardware-based solutions. So customers can buy either a service from us or a hardware solution from us. So we have very versatile solutions. And I will talk for the first half of this PowerPoint on our testing services, and then Rob will speak about our hardware solutions. And then we'll conclude with a question and answer session, and we'll stay on as long as necessary to take as many questions as you have. Okay, so here's the big premise of today's webinar. Call centers can be easily overloaded. Okay, Call centers are extremely vital for a lot of different companies, organizations, industries. Um, a few examples are like emergency services like 911 and hospitals. But then you also have plenty of other industries that rely on call centers. For instance, airlines use call centers, hotel chains use call centers. I mean, basically every industry out there uses call centers. They do it to either respond to emergencies or provide customer support or long distance services or something. But it's very, but basically call centers are ubiquitous. And so the problem is that in times of crisis, these call centers can be easily overloaded. Like for instance, right now during this whole COVID-19 crisis, um, whether you have hospitals being overloaded or emergency services being overloaded with phone calls coming in, or even airlines being overloaded with customers calling in to change their airline tickets, like I've had to do several times and wait on the line for several hours. Um, these call centers can get easily overloaded, and that's a huge problem, right? Because that means that these organizations and companies lose the ability to operate, and they can get, and customers can get angry. This all leads to a loss of revenue for companies, a loss of reputation for companies and governments and local governments and so on. So there's a lot at stake here in setting up a call center, and it's not trivial to do. It's not trivial to set up a call center that's operating 24/7 and is stable and is able to handle a high call load. So call centers must be tested. That's this main bullet down here. Um, they have to be tested in a variety of ways. One thing that you want to test is, can they handle a large volume of calls? Uh, so we've worked with several call centers in the past, and some of them are just interested in, hey, can GL Communications hit us with like 300 simultaneous calls? And can our call center handle that? We want to test our ability to handle those calls and test our redundancy and our ability to roll over and so on. Some call centers are interested in testing out their interactive voice response, or IVR. For those of you who are not familiar with IVR, basically that's when you call into a call center and they say, press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press or say your date of birth to confirm your account information, stuff like that. And so these interactive voice response systems usually are multi-stage. You usually have to press or say something and then press or say something else. And so those can easily get very complicated very quickly. So those type of systems have to be tested. Voicemail systems, of course, have to be tested, and call quality has to be tested. If people are calling in and your operators at the call center cannot hear them, or the customers cannot hear the operators, that's a huge problem, obviously. So call centers must be tested, and GL Communications, what we're going to show you over the next course of this webinar is our various test solutions for all of these different test scenarios. So I actually want to spend the majority of the time on this slide because I think it's the most important slide we have. Let's start by first analyzing the right-hand side of this figure. We have our call center here, and usually the call center has some private branch exchange, and these private branch exchanges are basically like gateways. They're connected to the public switch telephone network. They can be voice over IP trunks or PRI trunks. If it's an emergency services, that usually you have some selective router. But in any case, they have a connection to the outside world through these private branch exchanges. And then when a customer calls in, the first thing that they're greeted with is this interactive voice response system. So this is where they say or press digits or say something to an automated system, and then go through multiple stages of that. And then finally, there's a automated call distributor, which will, based on the results of the IVR, distribute the call wherever it needs to go. So maybe this customer needs to talk to a physical person. Maybe this customer just needs to hear some recorded announcement, or maybe they're, just looking for something simple like directions or account information. Or, again, in the case of emergency services, they're going to talk to a physical person. So at a high level, this is basically how these call centers are constructed. Now, this is all on the customer side. What GL can do is basically from the cloud, with our own proprietary software and hardware, we can generate a large volume of calls from the cloud going out to the PSTN to test these call centers. So we can generate hundreds of sustained calls, and this is all customizable. So if you want to specify how many calls should be sustained, you can do that. You can tell us how many calls per second. You can tell us if you want to ramp up, like if you want to start off at like a 1 call per second until you get 100 simultaneous calls and then stop. There's all sorts of different ways to send out the calls. You can also tell us what type of traffic is in these calls. Do you want us to send digits? Do you want us to send some pre-recorded voice file? Do you want us to send some tones? We can customize all of that. So basically, like for instance, if you want to test the IVR, then maybe you want us to generate calls that wait for a certain amount of time and then press and then send a digit in and then send another digit in. And that's how you can test an IVR system. So we can customize basically all aspects of the call. We can customize the call duration. So maybe you want 100 simultaneous calls. Each call has to be up and running for 2 minutes. We can do that. Or 20 seconds or 5 minutes. It's all customizable because we're using our proprietary software and hardware to do this. And Rob will talk more about it. It's called MAPS, which is a acronym. It stands for Message Automation and Protocol Simulation. And Rob will discuss this later on. So this is the main slide actually. From the cloud, we can hit your call center with whatever types of calls you need. And so let me quickly go to the next slide here just to make sure.
Vikram, let me go back to the previous slide.
Yeah.
Now, let me just interject for a second. So the key here is we can basically set up a load test to your call center, to your IVR system, to whatever you have. You provide us with the phone numbers, or you provide us with direct IP links, and we connect to it, generating hundreds of calls, sustaining these hundreds of calls over a period of time, possibly 60 minutes or 30 minutes or longer or whatever. It doesn't matter. You let us know. We sustain these calls. And then we can also let you know during the test, well, how many calls got through, okay, and how many calls failed. And then once they're up, how many calls got sustained over that period of time? Did any calls drop? So did your call center drop us? Okay? As we ramped up, did the calls drop or did the calls fail? So all that is possible. So we're not only just jumping in and throwing calls into your system, we're also analyzing and confirming that your call center is taking these calls, is accepting these calls. And if an IVR is required to get to the endpoint, we can do that. If it's required to send some audio or digits or what have you to confirm that the call is connected, we can do that. So and it doesn't matter where you're located in the world, we can call. we can call your center and set this up. So it's a full feature test without having any. Vikram mentioned the cloud many times, and all that means is we do not have to send any equipment out. We can do this at any time. We've done it for certain customers where it was a Saturday morning, and we had to run these tests because they wanted to make sure that we did not interfere with their normal processes. So we can test and verify and provide analysis of the completed test.
Yes, thank you, Rob. Yeah, yeah. So, like Rob mentioned, we are providing analysis to you to help you understand, how many calls went through, how many failed, and to help you troubleshoot your call center and find vulnerabilities, basically, in your call center. So, on this slide, we're just kind of summarizing what we just talked about. Hundreds of calls. We can test all your infrastructure and services. These calls are generated as a service, or what Rob will talk about later on. We can also deploy actual test equipment to your lab environment and do the calls that way. So we can come from the cloud, or we could deploy test equipment on your premises to test your call center that way. Yeah, this next bullet, this third bullet, is just basically the idea that we can generate these calls to any network. It doesn't matter if it's voice over IP or TDM or anything. Our software, our proprietary software, is very powerful. It can emulate all sorts of different protocols. So that's no problem. And again, like I mentioned, we can customize all sorts of aspects of the test. And we usually stand by. Usually we are monitoring this test in real time to make sure it's going properly. So, we're constantly monitoring the test. So we can always stop it at any time if the customer needs us to stop it. Okay, so this is just more about like what you can test. You can test all sorts of things. Like you can test your private branch exchange. You can test switches, gateways, routers. You can also test these services like this interactive voice response, the voicemail. We talked about the fact that you can generate hundreds of calls, and we can send all sorts of different types of traffic in these calls: voice, digits, tones. We can send data. We can send instant messages. We can generate all sorts of different traffic. Usually call centers are constantly being upgraded and new equipment is being put in. And so regression testing is very important. That's the idea that after you make a change to your call center infrastructure, you have to test it again. So every time you make a change, you have to test again. And so we can help with that process by automating this whole regression testing process. We can also do periodic testing. So we've had customers that basically want us to do this as a service every month and for like a few hours every month. And so we can do it periodically. We can test specific features. And as Rob will mention later on, he'll talk to you about how we can test voice quality, data quality, and quality of service. We use sophisticated algorithms to do that. Okay, so just for the next few slides, I'm going to talk specifically about public safety networks. I'll just kind of go briefly through these slides because we have worked with emergency services in the past, and we've helped them kind of troubleshoot and find problems in their emergency services networks. So basically, when you dial 911, it doesn't matter if you're dialing from a cell phone, an IP phone, or from the traditional landline telephone network. You are going to get to this 911 selective router. And from this 911 selective router, it will then send your call to the appropriate PSAP. PSAP stands for Public Safety Access Point. So It'll figure out your location based on some criteria, and it will route your call to the appropriate PSAP. And from there, the PSAP takes the call and dispatches emergency services. So obviously, this is a extremely important call center system, right? This thing has to be functioning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It has to be resilient against a large call load, and it has to be rigorously tested. And so we've worked with emergency services to test these networks, and specifically, we're testing these selective routers to make sure that they can take the calls and route them to the proper PSAP. And like I alluded to before, we can generate the calls as if it's coming from a cell phone, as if it's coming from a VoIP phone, or as if it's coming from a landline telephone. That's no problem. We can hit the selective router from a variety of different types of phone calls. On this slide, we just want to say usually there's a camera trunk involved that's connected to this 911 selective router, and our proprietary software can simulate these camera trunks. Both analog and digital camera simulations are supported. And finally, this last bullet talks about next generation 911. I actually have a slide on this, so let me just go to the slide. So some of you may know a lot of emergency services networks are transitioning to these next generation 911 systems, where not only will they be able to take calls, but they can also take text messages, and you can send in video and so on. So because that's obviously very important also in emergency situations. So we have the ability to do that as well. We can send text messages, we can make voice calls, we can do it over all sorts of different protocols. And again, we're testing this selective router here and seeing if it can handle the various types of traffic at high load and distribute the call to the PSAPs and so on. So I know that so since there are a lot of customers out there that are interested in these next generation 911 systems, and a lot of states are migrating to these systems, but of course these systems have to be rigorously tested before you deploy them. So we do have good solutions here to help test these next generation 911 systems. Okay, so to summarize the first half of this presentation, we are coming from the cloud. Our test equipment is in the cloud, and we can generate all sorts of calls through the public switch telephone network to the call center. And we can help the call center identify problems. We can give them statistics. We can give them reports. This is very flexible. Each call center is a little different in terms of what they want. But the bottom line is we can make these calls anywhere in the world because it's being routed through the public switch telephone network. So we can make these calls worldwide, and we're coming from the cloud. Just a couple other statistics. If we are going through the PSTN, then we can generate up to 1,000 sustained calls at a rate of 4 calls per second. So we can generate 4 calls per second, up to 1,000 sustained calls. If it's a VoIP call, then we don't need to go through the PSTN, like we deploy this right outside your customer premises or on your customer premises, then we can do a lot more. We can go up to 2,000 sustained calls at a rate of about 30 calls per second. And we can do VQT is voice quality testing. We can do voice quality testing for both these PSTN calls and these VoIP calls. And as Rob will talk about, interactive, we can test IVR and voicemail. So this concludes. Oh, yeah, sorry, just one other slide. Behind the scenes, if we provide this as a service, then you don't actually need to see like our proprietary software. However, this is what it looks like. So we have this message automation and protocol simulation tool called Maps, and we're able to use it to generate a ton of calls and get all of the call statistics. So you see here, I apologize if the font is a little small, but we see like completed calls, past calls, failed calls, calls per second. We can import scripts. We can get graphs and so on. So this is what's happening behind the scenes. And we can, of course, give all this data to the customer after the test. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude that section of the PowerPoint, and I'll turn it over to Rob, who's going to talk in more depth about the actual hardware solutions that we offer. So Rob, feel free to begin.
Hey, thanks, Vikram. By the way, the last slide that Vikram...
Oh, yeah, Sanjeev, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There is one question from a customer, MTA Mobility. He's asking us to discuss the text messaging options some more in detail. Is it possible?
Yeah, Rob, do you want to talk about the text messaging?
Okay, for text messaging, it's not really something we can do in the cloud right now, but it is something that we can do remotely on your mobile devices, where we can have your mobile devices automatically send text messages as well as detect incoming text messages using an app, and then determine how long it takes the text message to get from one place to another, as well as did the messages go out, were the messages received by the network, and again, that can be done automatically, remotely, and can be part of a larger test environment, such as voice quality testing, phone calls, making mobile calls while doing the text messaging, things like that. Okay.
Sanjeev, do we have any other questions?
No, we can continue.
Okay.
All right. So just to reflect on what Vikram said about the Maps software, the GL Maps software, just to note so that is running. That's our software that's running in a cloud-based system to connect to your call centers. That can also be set up to be deployed directly to your system. We've done it both ways, so that you can control it yourself, and whenever you want, you can perform regression testing on your system. I'll go through that right here. So anyway, so first of all, with IVR and voicemail testing, the testing that Vikram mentioned for cloud-based, that's going to basically just traverse an IVR to get to an endpoint and confirm that we're at the endpoint, and then sustain the call to make sure that the call center is working. If you actually have to go through an IVR and test the IVR, we're going to do that a little differently with some equipment that we deploy, so that we can confirm that the IVR is working. So at your call center, if you have an IVR, if you have any type of voicemail system, we can traverse that IVR any way you want us to, in any manner. So we can traverse different types of the IVR, so getting to different endpoints by sending DTMF digits or by sending audio prompts. So we can test in both ways, and then we can also confirm that coming back are proper. So we do a speech to text and then confirm based on reference text. So we can confirm the prompts, confirm the IVR is working, and then for the voicemail, we can deposit audio into the voicemail system, and then they confirm that we got that voicemail in the system. So all that's available, and we use one of our products. I'll show that in a second. We have two different products that can do this, both at high density or at a lower density, but with high definition audio. Okay, Vikram, go to the next slide, please. Okay. So with load testing, again, using our hardware, using the GL hardware deployed at your site, we can, in the same manner as we're doing testing through the cloud-based solution, we could do load testing directly on your system. So we can set up tens of calls or hundreds of calls or even more, and hit your system, your network, with all these calls while performing IVR, performing voice quality testing, performing path confirmation, whatever is needed, we can do that. It's all user configurable. Whichever solution I mentioned, it has that same capability of user configurable scripts and remote operation. So not only can you use our scripts to control the functionality of these tests, but you can also use our APIs so that you can actually put the functionality, the requirements inside your own software, and then remote control our solution to do exactly what you want to do. And then not only can you run these tests, but you can also analyze all the audio and the call control, so that, for instance, metrics that would be returned would include call failures, call drops, path confirmation, voice quality, delay measurements, things like that, and also IVR testing. So did the IVR pass or fail based on what we are expecting in terms of prompts and such. So all of that can be tested and confirmed through the software and provide different types of reports, automatically provide the reports. Okay, let's go to the next one. So this is the MAPS solution, what Vikram was mentioning earlier in the previous slide. So for the MAPS solution, we're basically going to support either two-wire analog phones, PSTN connections, or VoIP. So you can also do VoIP. And we can create a high-density testing solution. You can see we can go up to 192 ports. We can actually go above that, depending on what you want, because multiple systems can be connected together. With this solution, again, we can test all aspects of your network. And one of the things I neglected to mention is we can also test the secondary services of, for instance, the PSTN network. So that means testing three-way calling, caller ID, I can't, yeah, all the different aspects of secondary calling that's part of the network, and that by you entering different types of keys or by getting any type of FSK from the network, that can all be tested, confirmed, analyzed. So that's also something that can be part of this and can be tested as a high-density solution. So we're not just testing a single line at a time. We're testing all these lines at the same time. Okay, and this is deployed. You can see there's a rack there. So this is deployed as a full system that is going to go out there, and you're going to have a bunch of connections into your network. And so we can deploy it as a very large system or a relatively small system. And again, it's fully script capable. So you create scripts to control this, and then you can also remotely control the operations. Okay, Vikram. Okay. So this is another solution that we have for testing your systems, both IVR, voice quality, secondary services as well, all that stuff. And this is using our VQuad solution, which is lower density. So each VQuad system can support 12 devices, whether they're 2-wire analog, but a 4-wire analog, mobile phones. So you can also test using mobile phones, or VoIP user interfaces. So SIP user agents, I should say. So this solution is a lower density. Now, again, it can cascade up, so you can put multiple VQuads together and they can all remote control each other. But the key here is we test a lot of different types of endpoints, or we can mimic a lot of different endpoints, such as a mobile phone. And we can also support high definition audio. So on 2-wire networks, there are several cable operators that are deploying to your home. You know, they'll deploy an ATA, an analog telephone adapter, so that you can connect your analog phone to that and place calls over the VoIP. Those ATAs are now high definition, meaning that they're going at a rate of 16,000 samples per second. So we can test that on the 2-wire line using this solution. We can also test high definition on mobile, or voice over LTE or 5G, or voice over Wi-Fi, all using high definition voice. So that's all available here. And again, this solution can be deployed as a very simple solution, a single box, or it can be deployed as a full rack system with multiple devices. And this is, as mentioned, can be fully automated for testing using the VQuad scripting, and it could also be remotely controlled using the VQuad APIs and CLIs, which you can also dump into your own application. Now, another thing we're showing here is there's a central system. So all the results, all the events, everything that's done during the testing can go into a central database located at your site, and then you can access that information through a web browser, what we call our web viewer, create reports, generate graphics, generate analytical reports, whatever you want to do. So that's all available well. And that includes not only the VQuad results, but also voice quality, the IVR, speech-to-text results, plus a bunch of other analytical metrics. Okay? This is just another slide showing the VQuad solution. This is basically the VQuad probe, which is a portable box. Previously, I showed you a rack system with a bunch of lines supported, where we can put multiple systems into one rack. This is a single probe with 2 FXO or mobile connections, interfaces, which you can deploy very easily. It's a rather small box. You don't need a computer with it. The computer is embedded. You ship it out to your site, turn it on, remotely control it, and you're running tests. Okay? So one other thing I wanted to mention here is, so for voice quality, you can see here, we support both the older generation PESC algorithm, which is ITU 862. We also support the Polka algorithm, which is ITU 863, and we support the next generation Polka, which is Polka version 3. So all of those are supported based on the licensing that you get, and with our voice quality, that's also fully automated. So as it sees the recorded audio files, it'll grab them, analyze them, and then post them to the database, while also providing additional audio metrics like signal and noise level and jitter and things like that. There is a lot of audio analysis that the VQuad can do. The maps can do the same. So both of them have audio analysis plus the ability to load test your system, traverse the IVR, do all that other stuff as well. Okay. So these are just some of the protocols. I don't believe this is a complete list, but these are some of the protocols that and interfaces that GL supports with their maps solution and their the VQuad solution. So you can see that we can pretty much connect to anything with our hardware and perform a wide variety of tests and analysis on your networks or on your devices under test. Okay, so I think that was the last slide. I ran through pretty fast.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. So we still have like 15 minutes or so for questions. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for attending this webinar, and we will, like I said at the beginning, we'll make this presentation available and post it on our website and send an email notification when it's been posted. You can contact us at any time at info@gl.com to learn more about this call center test solution. And we really look forward to talking to you more about this or any of our test solutions. So at this point, Sanjeev, can you let us know, are there any questions?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions. The first one is there a way to hit the database past the IVR system to verify the number of simultaneous transactions that the database can handle?
I didn't follow the question.
Yeah, they're asking, is there a way to hit a database past the IVR system to verify the number of simultaneous transactions the database can handle?
So is there, Vikram, did you understand?
Yeah, so basically, Rob, the IVR system is querying some back-end database, which may have information like account information for the customer and so on.
Yeah.
And so if multiple people are calling into the IVR and, like, for instance, entering their account information to query that back-end database, the person is asking, like, is there a way to, like, test how many simultaneous transactions that back-end database can handle? That's kind of the question.
That's an interesting question. I mean, we can confirm how many simultaneous we confirm how many simultaneous points are actually talking to the database at a given time if we know when we're talking to the database. So as we traverse the IVR, we don't know when it's accessing the database or not, because again, we're an endpoint. So if we know that when we enter a credit card number, we're accessing the database, then we can have multiple endpoints talking entering the credit card information at the same time. If we get now, I'm assuming that if the database has an issue or if there's something wrong with the IVR, we'll get a message that we didn't get your credit card information or there was an issue with this or something. And we'll get that type of response. So we can record the response and then let you know in the analysis report whether, how many we got as passed. We got past that point and how many we did not get past that point. We don't have access to the database itself because, again, we're an endpoint unless you give us access to the database. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, 1 minute. I think this question is posted by Sami Nazar. So I'll just unmute him and let him ask his question. Sami?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead, Sami.
All right. So, I think Rob answered the question to some extent, but I believe you can assume that we know from the IVR tree when we are hitting the database. And the question was really, can we somehow figure out, from whatever, maybe from the file what you're recording, if that transaction was successful. I mean, just by listening to the
that's going to be the prompt that's coming back. We can record that and we can confirm if it was successful or not. Yes.
Right, but then you have to listen to every single prompt that's returned to you to be able to figure out, or is there a way that you can count it automatically and without having to listen to every recording?
Well, it's not a problem to listen to every recording because it's built into the script. So after we deposit the credit card information, we're going to record. That would be in the script, and then we're going to analyze that recording doing a speech to text. So we may have, let's say, we've got 50 lines talking to the same IVR. So each one would do the same script. Each one would be running the same script, and we would analyze all of those 50 prompts from each script, and we would then be able to tell you, well, 40 passed and 10 failed.
Okay, but that you have to do like manually. It's not automated.
No. This is all automated. Everything is automated through the script. The speech to text is fully automated as well.
Okay, and so I can just look at like the number of calls that were sent and how many were successful.
Correct.
Simple, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rob.
Sanjeev,
anything else, Sanjeev?
Yeah, we have one more question. When we say testing when we are saying that we support text to speech, IVR, and virtual machine, what are the different languages that we support there?
That's a good question. So we're using a service to support the speech to text, and this service does support all languages. And in fact, we had a request recently from our China office to support the Chinese language, which the service does support. However, our VQuad solution did not, so we're actually updating our VQuad solution to support that as well. It's a simple update, but bottom line is, yes, we do support all language or most all languages.
Okay.
One
last
Sanjeev,
question.
Any more questions?
Yeah, we have got one last question. What is the difference between the cloud-based service versus the hardware-based solution?
Okay, very good question. So the cloud-based, nothing has to be deployed. Nothing has to be deployed. You basically tell us what number you want us to dial or numbers, and how many calls you want us to set up. What you want us to do when we get into the call. So if there's an IVR we need to traverse, what do we have to do to traverse it? If you just want it to sit on the line after we call, or if you want us to send audio or whatever it is, you tell us exactly what you want us to do. We'll set it up, and then we'll run that test whenever you want us to, which could be in the middle of the night, it could be on a weekend, whatever. we'll run that test. Nothing has to be deployed, and then we give you analysis of that test. So now each test that you want us to run, if you want us to do this on a monthly basis, it would be a service. So each time we run a test, that's we provide that service. If we deploy the equipment, it's a hardware solution. Then we deploy the equipment. You have a lot. Well, yeah, you do have a lot more flexibility with the equipment at your site because you can run the high density calls, but you can also run simple calls to do a lot more analysis, like voice quality analysis or supplementary service analysis or things like that. And then you can also set it up for regression testing. So whenever you make a change to your hardware or your software within your network, then you can just run a script from our system, and boom, you're getting the results right then and there. You don't have to contact GL. You don't need our assistance. You just run the regression testing. If you want to make a change to the regression testing in any way, let's say you're testing IVR, the IVR change, you can make that change directly into the script. If you need our help, you can contact us. We can help you with the script changes, but you can do it yourself and then run that test. So you get the flexibility with the hardware, but that's not always needed. Sometimes you just need to hit the call center with a bunch of calls and see what happens. So that's sort of the differences between the two.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. That's all we have.
Okay, great. I just want to, the earlier question that was asked in the middle of the webinar about the text messaging, I just want to piggyback on Rob's answer there. We're using Maps, our proprietary software, message automation and protocol simulation, to simulate the message session relay protocol, MSRP, the MSRP protocol, and we can send these text messages out, confirm that they're received, and get text messages back. We can customize the contents of the text message, so we have a very flexible way to send out text messages and confirm whether we get any response back, and if they're received or not. So I hope that expands upon that question a little bit. And so I guess if there's no further questions, we'll go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you, everyone, for listening in, and we'll definitely send out an email when this webinar will be posted. So please stay safe and feel free to contact us anytime, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.